If you've ever hurt your back deadlifting or are afraid to do them in fear that you will end up hurting yourself, you're not alone. There's 5 reasons why so many people injure themselves with this exercise. I'll share what these are, how to find the right deadlift for your body, and how to perform it for a safer, stronger deadlift. First, let's discuss why deadlifts are perceived as such a dangerous exercise to begin with, despite their many benefits and back strengthening properties. While rounding the back during the deadlift is actually a popular method that elite powerlifters often use to lift more weight, for the not so elite average lifter who isn't conditioned to lift that way, the safest way to deadlift is with a neutral spine. The problem with deadlifts though is that it's very easy to lose this neutral position. In a bench press or a squat, if you don't have enough strength to lift the weight, you won't be able to complete the lift. During the deadlift, however, rounding the spine actually makes the lift easier. And given that you're not actively looking at your spine in the mirror, it makes it very easy to do this without you even realizing it. Combine this with a heavy load, the lack of back and core strength to support your spine in this position, your back can eventually wear out and lead to injury. This is further complicated by the fact that the structure of some people's hip bones makes it virtually impossible to maintain a neutral spine with traditional deadlift form.
So what can we do about it? Well, today I brought in world-renowned back pain expert Dr. Stuart McGill, who has studied the science of back pain for over 30 years. He's also personally trained and recovered elite level athletes, some of which have deadlifted over 1,000 pounds. Together we'll dive into the 5 causes of back injury during deadlifts and how you can avoid them.
The first reason has to do with your hip structure. Some individuals are born with deep hip sockets. These individuals tend to have the most trouble getting into and pulling from the bottom position of a deadlift.
When descending into the deadlift, if the foot stance is too narrow, you can see how in this particular person you will get a mechanical collision between the top of the hip socket and the leg bone, and that creates FAI, or femoral acetabular impingement.
So in this case, if they try to get deeper than their hip anatomy allows, they'll feel a pinching sensation in their hips that stops them from getting any deeper without. In contrast, other individuals are born with more shallow hip sockets. The populations that have the highest rates of shallow hip sockets come from regions like Bulgaria, Poland, China, and Ukraine. And it's no coincidence that the top weightlifters are often born there, as their shallow hip sockets make getting into and coming up from the bottom of a deadlift or squat much easier. Now, this doesn't mean that those with deep hip sockets shouldn't deadlift.
The solution would be to widen out the stance with this particular anatomy, and you can see you can descend much deeper.
Now, to find the perfect foot stance for you and your hips, there is a simple 2-part test that we can do.
One of the best tests to link anatomy and deadlift style is the pelvic rock back. So I'm going to set my knees on the floor fairly narrow, and then I'm going to adopt an all-4 position, and I'm checking in the mirror to see the curve of my back. I'm going to have my feet the same width as my knees, and as I rock back, I can now feel the collision in my hip, and if I go any further and check that in the mirror, I can see now that I'm stressing my back. So the solution, I'm going to try and find a more stress-free position. I've now widened out my knees and my feet, and I find spine neutral and rock back, and there all of a sudden I'm matching my anatomy and finding a much lower descent possible in the deadlift. Now I'm going to widen out a little bit further, and I see that, I've found a little bit of a compromise now. So my optimal position is somewhere in the middle. Now the key is to translate that information onto the platform.
So the first part of the test is going to get you the right foot width to use when deadlifting. The next part of the test is to play around with turning your feet further in or out and seeing what is most comfortable as you get into the bottom position.
Always have trouble getting into the bottom of a deadlift without compromising their lower back. This is where the next cause of injury comes in.
When using standard 45-pound weights on each side, the bar sits 8.75 inches above the floor. This exact height was a manufacturing decision made long ago to protect Olympic weightlifters from crushing their skulls in the event of an overhead lift gone wrong. While it was a smart design feature, it forces you to have the required range of motion and the right body structure to be able to safely deadlift from that height. And if you're using smaller weight plates, the required range of motion increases even further. So rather than forcing your body to pull from the ground, elevate the bar. You can use blocks, a power rack, or weight plates to shorten the range of motion to a level where you can now perform the deadlift comfortably with perfect form.